Good afternoon, Internet, and welcome to my video. My name is Anna, and today I'm going to do the eyeshadow tag. So I didn't create this tag. This was created by Samantha March and Ali Glines, but I first found it on Jen Loves Reviews. It's really hard for me to say her name. Jen Loves Reviews channel. And then after I watched that, I watched Teresa is Dead's channel, and I fell down a rabbit hole of watching as many versions of this as I could, so I really enjoyed the tag. Obviously, I went back and watched Samantha and Ali's versions of the tag, and they gave me some inspiration. Ali actually inspired me to buy a new eyeshadow palette, which I probably didn't need, but there you go. Anyway, so I really liked the video, and I wanted to do it myself. I know this is an old tag. I think it's at least 3 months old, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I wrote down all of the answers and everything that I was going to talk about or could possibly talk about. I've got 4 piles of eyeshadow palettes over here. I'm just gonna dive right into it, okay? So if you see me looking down, I'm just looking at this piece of paper because some of these eyeshadow palettes have ridiculously complicated names. So I was not gonna remember all of them. All right, so this first question that the tag wants us to answer is, what is your newest eyeshadow palette? And this one really made me think because I hadn't bought an eyeshadow palette, well, with the exception of the one I ordered yesterday. I hadn't bought an eyeshadow palette since before the pandemic. So I had to go back and really think about it, but my answer was let me read this because this is one of the ones where I knew I wasn't gonna remember the name. It's the Pat McGrath Labs Ritualistic Rose Blitz Astral Quad. So I did not buy this the first time it came out. I actually didn't even know when it first came out. I missed it completely. People were talking about it and it was already sold out. I bought it during the restock that happened I don't know how many months ago it was, but that's when I purchased it. So I really like this quad. Obviously it's all special shades and that's Pat McGrath's specialty, but it's really, really nice. Not my favorite, but I like it a lot. And I got it on sale. I think she had free shipping and handling and 10% off with a code, which isn't, I grant you, is not a lot of money, but it helps take care of the tax. So you're just paying for the eyeshadow palette itself. But I really like that one a lot. And I love her special shade formulas, so. All right, so the second question is your oldest eyeshadow palette. And this one is also kind of controversial because my newest one is a quad. So does a quad count as an eyeshadow palette? I don't know. Will this count as an eyeshadow palette? I don't know. I'm counting it. But it's a Mary Kay compact that I got in college. So I graduated in 2011 from college. So this is at least a decade old. It came with a lip gloss, which I still have but don't use. It came with a couple brushes, which I lost one of them. And then you had a bronzer or a blush down here. I picked a bronzer and then 3 eyeshadows up above. You could have went with 6 eyeshadows, but I didn't. And then you can see I severely hit pan on 2 of them and then barely used the one in the center, but this thing is old. It still performs well, but it's old. I don't think I'll ever purchase from Mary Kay again. Number one, I'm pretty sure they're considered an MLM, which is not something I was thinking about when I was in college over a decade ago. But also, I wouldn't even know where to buy Mary Kay if I wanted to, and I feel like they're kind of overpriced for what you get. That could be just a personal opinion or what I was remembering from my experience back then, because I feel like this compact, with everything that was in it, I think it was $70 some, which is a lot of money, and I can't believe I shelled that out as a college student. Maybe not the best choice I've ever made, but there you go. It's the honest truth. It's the oldest eyeshadow I still own. All right, so number 3, what is the most expensive palette you have? Now this is the one that kind of started to give me trouble. And so I have 2 answers, and I don't know if that's cheating or not, but my first answer would be the Natasha Denona Gold palette, because I think this is $129, which is crazy expensive. I didn't pay $129 for it because I think I got it at Sephora on sale. Trying to remember, but I'm not the kind of person who would have paid full price for this. But this is what the palette looks like. It's really, really nice. I like it a lot. You can see the shades that have little dents in them, but it's very enjoyable. I like her formula. I know not everybody loves her formula, but I'm a fan. And what gave me trouble is I have a Pat McGrath palette that is I think, $4 cheaper. However, you get less shades, and I'm not really sure on the ounces, so maybe the ounces is comparable. But so I also thought I would throw in the, let me read this again because these names are crazy. I love Pat McGrath, but her names are out there. So it would be the Mothership 1 Subliminal palette. And so here you go right here. So this would be her first Mothership palette. It was not the first one I bought, but it is the first one that she produced. And so this is $125, but you get less shades. So is this more expensive than this? No, technically this one's more expensive, but for what you're getting, this one may be considered a better value. So it's one of these two palettes would be my most expensive. Yeah. All right. Number 4, most affordable palette. So again, affordable. How do you work this? Like, I have a $10 palette from Juvia's Place. Comes with 6 shadows. Really nice. Love it a lot. Everyday looks. Okay. $10. However, you only get 6 shades. Okay. And they're small pans. So is this more affordable than this palette, which is more money? I think this was, I'm not sure how much this was. I want to say $16 for some reason, but I don't even think that's accurate. And even if it is, I got it like 40% off because I feel like BH Cosmetics is constantly having sales. I only purchase from them when they're on sale, which isn't exactly necessary because they're already affordable to begin with. They're pretty comparable to ColourPop with their original pricing, but because I feel like they are on sale so often, why not buy when you know they're going to be on sale? And then this palette is huge. I'm going to reference this later for my biggest palette. And so you get so much for so little amount of money. I think it was a $16 palette, but if not, I didn't pay that much for it because I got it 40% off. So the value here is like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the least I've ever paid for an eyeshadow palette that I still own. But the value here, I think, is better. You get more for your buck. So the next question is going to be my everyday palette, which would be an ABH palette. I have the Jacquiana ABH palette here right now, and it's actually the palette I'm wearing on my eyes. So if you look in, I've got like this like darker, glittery, I don't know, slightly smoky neutral look going on, and that's easily achieved with this palette. And what I love about this palette, let me get the brush out of there so it doesn't fall, is that you have enough neutrals in here to do an everyday neutral look if that's what you're going for, but you have plenty of color options to spice it up if that's not your jam. And I love these 6 shades over here, this quadrant, and these 2 over here. I'm not as big of a fan for the very colorful mattes. I like them, but I don't reach for them as often. But as you can see, I spend a lot of my time in this section. Sponsored is my absolute favorite. So today what I'm wearing, I have this shade in my crease, this shade on top of my lid, this in my outer corner, this in the center of my lid, and then this in my inner corner. And so, big fan of this. Probably, I don't know, it's hard to describe, like, probably the most options you're ever given in an ABH palette. I feel like you have so many more like looks that you can create with what's in here. And it was, funny enough, it was my first ABH palette that I ever bought. And then I liked it so much I went back and bought some of the classic palettes, but I did get this one first. So, all right, so now I need to talk about the most colorful palette. And this one gave me a little trouble. I had 2 options that I could go with, so I thought I would just mention both of them. I'm not sure if that's cheating, but one is more fall and one is more like summery spring. So first off is the palette I've already talked about, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you've got the Ace Beauty or Ace Beauté, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Flare palette. And I have mentioned this on my channel before. I love this for fall, but it's very vibrant for fall. You've got this intense lime green, you've got a very bright red, bold colors in here, even though it's a fall palette. So I think I discovered them through BoxyCharm and then found a palette that spoke to me, that had like a color story that I would appreciate more. So I can thank BoxyCharm for pointing me in that direction. And then the second option I was considering was the BH Cosmetics Weekend Festival palette. So this is quite colorful, more spring and summer. You've got some intense colors in here, but you also have a few neutrals, and very affordable. I think I bought this at the same time as the Oasis palette. So I think I got both of these for 40% off. All right, so the next one's kind of controversial again. We're going back into that territory. Does this count as a palette? I don't know. I'm going to count it. You can complain later if you want to. But my smallest palette is going to be the Kaja Beauty Bento. And the one that I have here is Chocolate Dahlia, but I do have this in a different shade. And basically what you have here is it's almost like the melt stacks, except they are connected and you do not disconnect them. So in that way, I almost like them more than the melt stacks, because you're not going to lose anything, but then you can't spread them out. So in that way, I like it a little less than the melt stacks. But it's very tiny, quite compact. I mean, look at it compared to the size of my gigantic head, very small. And I like this particular one the best. I think that's why I picked the Chocolate Dahlia, is because you get a shimmer and then you get 2 mattes. My other Beauty Bento has all shimmers in it, which is really nice if you're just looking for toppers. However, I mean, I love shimmers, don't get me wrong. I'll put like 3 shimmers on my eye at one time, but I don't do a completely and totally shimmer look. Like, I do put mattes in my crease, so I do want at least 1 matte. So that's why I prefer that one more. All right, my biggest eyeshadow palette. So I would say physically biggest would be this Oasis palette that I already showed you. Quite huge, quite large compared to my large head. But it doesn't have the most shades. So I also considered mentioning the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. It's like a small version of one of her big palettes. So you get 28 shades, which is why I consider this one of my biggest palettes. It has the most eyeshadow colors, has the most options in it. I have mentioned this on my channel before. However, it's technically slightly smaller physically than the Oasis palette, but I would say you get the more options, you have the more shades, so it's quite big in that respect. So if you're talking physically big, yeah, it would be the Oasis. But like, I don't know, eyeshadow big, the Metropolis, maybe? You can decide in the comments. Go ahead and fight about it. All right. So next palette is my Best Memory. So this one put me for a loop, and I was like, best memory? How many memories do I have that are tied to a specific eyeshadow palette, and what would I pick for this? And I'm like, oh, maybe I should pick what I wore at my wedding. And then I'm like, I didn't do my makeup for my wedding. I paid someone to do my makeup. And I'm not even really sure what brand of eyeshadow they used. So that doesn't help me. But I did take this to Vegas with me for my wedding and wore it to my rehearsal dinner and wore it on my honeymoon. And I think I might have brought one other palette, but this was the palette I used almost exclusively. And I think I also took it when I went to my bachelor party. So I had my bachelor party in like Palm Springs. I got married in Vegas. Our honeymoon was on a cruise to Mexico. And so this has traveled with me a lot. And so my answer is the Soft Glam palette, because it's hit a lot of major milestones with me recently. And I love this palette. So while the Jackiana palette got me into the ABH formula and made me love it, and I loved all the options that I got there, those are dramatic colors, especially for someone who is as pale as me, where this eyeshadow palette is perfect for my skin tone. And it's so good. The formula is so good. Highly recommend it. Reach for it all the time. You can tell that I love the shimmer shades a lot. But yes, it does have the best memories for me. So it's beautiful. I only have 3 ABH palettes, so that's number 2. And then I think I also have Norvina, the original Norvina palette. So yes, okay. All right, so this is where the controversy will come back, and I will have to tell you what I think is the most hyped in a good way versus not. Like, what is worth the hype and what is not worth the hype. And this is where it gets tricky for me, because I don't know how to explain this, but I guess I'm probably not watching all the same YouTubers that you're watching, and I'm probably not following all the same Instagrammers you're watching, or following. And so what is hyped and shoved in my face versus what's not is very subjective. But these next two products are things that I was encouraged and told to buy, and then whether or not I enjoyed them afterwards. So the first one is, what is worth the hype, in my opinion? So I had to think of something that got a lot of hype. People talked about it a lot, in my opinion, and whether or not I liked it. I went ahead and went with the Gemini palette from Melt. So I feel like this was talked about a lot, and mostly because I think it was sold out multiple times. I think when I bought this, it was on like the second or third restock. I definitely did not buy it the first time. I know I didn't buy it the second time, so I either bought it the third or fourth time that you could buy this palette. I did not get it at Sephora, so I want to say I bought it the third time you could buy the palette, because I bought it directly from the website. And if you love mattes and you like swampy greens, you're gonna like this palette. If you if you don't like those colors, just pass. Just pass on this, because you're gonna be over here in the neutrals and you can get that in a different palette. You don't need this palette. But if you are really intrigued by this color story, I think Melt deserves the hype around this palette. It was the first eyeshadow palette I ever saw that looked like this, that had these kind of colors, that told this kind of color story. And since then it has become popular enough that people have tried to dupe them, or not exactly duped them, but have used those colors in a similar way, intentionally or unintentionally, that make me think of this palette. In fact, people would even argue that Melt duped themselves when they did their 420 palette, because it was very reminiscent of the Gemini palette. And if you have the Gemini palette, you really don't need the 420 palette unless you're in love with collecting everything from Melt, or you just really, really, really like different shades of green. But if I was going to pick one thing that was hyped a lot to me that I did enjoy after receiving it, it would be this one. And I know there's a couple people who have had trouble with some of their Melt eyeshadow palettes puffing up and getting weird. I've not experienced that, and I have had this for a while, and I've had zero repercussions. So I don't know if it was just the batch I got, but I did really like this. And I will say that if you happen to have blonde hair, I think the greens look especially good on people with like blonde hair or blonde highlights. Like, it doesn't have to be your natural hair color, but if you have like lighter hair, I think the green and then the yellow in your hair, or the blondness of your hair, really look nice. It doesn't mean it won't look good on you if you are a brunette like me, or if you have, you know, red hair or whatever, or fuchsia hair, whatever color of hair you happen to have. But I will say that whenever I look at the Instagram pictures and they happen to have someone with like lighter hair and the greens going with that, it looks really cool. All right, so what was not worth the hype? And again, I'm not sure if this was hyped for everybody, but I remember when this came out, there was a lot of talk about it, and it sold out immediately, and I had wanted to purchase it, but then couldn't, and I had to wait for the restock, and I remember being angry about that. And then when I got it, I was disappointed. So I would say the palette I have that's not worth the hype is the Tarteist Pro Remix. I have issues with this palette, to say the least. All right, it's not the worst palette ever. It's not workable. I mean, it's not, how do I want to say this? It's not workable. You can definitely create eye looks with it. It doesn't have a terrible formula. It's nothing like that. It's just lackluster. It was very different than I thought it was going to be. And then I didn't realize I was going to have issues with it that I ended up having until I actually owned it. So as you can see, I don't reach for it very often. So my first issue is like the layout is dumb. The layout is dumb. When you look at the original Tarteist Pro palette, each row, and I'll hold this one up again so I can kind of explain, but each row would make a full eye look, okay? You had a bunch of mattes and then a shimmer at the end, a bunch of mattes and a shimmer at the end, and it made sense, okay? There was structure. This, no structure at all. It makes no sense. I would not create a whole eye look with any of these rows. You could, and if you were an excellent makeup artist, I'm sure you can make it look good, but this is not something for beginners. This is not something for me personally. And then there's not enough mattes. For a palette this big, I feel like there should be at least 4 mattes, and I feel like they should be located in these circles. Otherwise, why keep these circles? I mean, I guess they're saving packaging because you can tell they put a gigantic sticker on the top and a gigantic sticker here, and if I were to peel it off, I'm sure it has the original packaging underneath it, so they're saving money there. But I would have put the matte shades right here, all right? And I would have had a better range of mattes. So they have a black matte, like a tan brown matte, and then like a peachy beige matte. And I feel like they need one more brown. All right, so like these 2 are matte, and this guy right here is matte, and that's just, it doesn't seem like enough. And I want them to be over here. I want them to be in this circle row so that there's purpose to the circles. I also hate fuchsia, so if they got rid of the fuchsia, that would be wonderful. I also think some of these shimmery grays are way too similar and unnecessary. Like you've got 3 shimmery grays right here that are quite light, and they're not that distinguishable when you put them on the eye. They look pretty much the same. So if you love shimmery grays and you just want like a lot of them in that specific tone, you get 3 in this palette, but otherwise, not necessary. I don't know. And then some of these, it's like, is that a matte with shimmers in it, or is that truly a shimmer shade? I don't know. This one kind of confuses me sometimes. I will say there are some beautiful shades in here. I really like the Create shade and the Sway shade, but yeah, did I need to buy this palette? No. Did I need to get mad that I couldn't buy it the first time it came out? Definitely not. Definitely not. Feel free to pass on that. All right, so next we need to talk about my favorite eyeshadow palette from my favorite brand. And when I thought of my favorite brand, I knew I had to stick to just my favorite brand of eyeshadow, because the way I feel about lipstick and mascara and other face products is completely different. I would pick probably a completely different brand than I would just if I was just thinking about eyeshadows. So I asked myself, what brands do I have multiples from? What brands haven't disappointed me with their formula on any of the palettes I own? What brands do I look at their upcoming events and releases and get excited for, or at least appreciate and not think that they're ugly? And I narrowed it down to like 2 brands, and then I had to question myself on those questions again. Because when I thought about what do I have multiples of, what do I really enjoy when I use it, what has never disappointed me, I came up with ABH and Pat McGrath. I think they're both really high quality. I've never been disappointed by one of the palettes I've bought from them. And I really, really love them and have warm feelings every time I use them. Okay, no difficulties at all in either one of them. However, then I had to think about the brand, and I was like, how do I feel about those 2 brands? I thought about ABH, and I was like, I only have 3 palettes from them, which is like more than normal people would have, but not a lot for like a collector. However, I'm not a collector, obviously. I would, if I was a collector, I'd have all the ABH palettes. I know that's a thing that people do. So I'm not a collector, I'm just buying what's intriguing me. And I noticed like nothing that ABH is coming out right now intrigues me. And maybe I'm not the demographic for the new Norvina line, but I look at it and I have 0 interest. And even the last couple traditional ABH palettes were not on my radar. I didn't even think about buying them. You know, I bought the Jackie Aina palette, I loved it, and then I went back and bought 2 older palettes, and that was it. That was my moment, and I've loved all 3 of them, but I've had no desire since then to buy any of their other palettes. So would they be considered my favorite eyeshadow brand? I don't know. So then I was looking more at Pat McGrath, and I was like, okay, I have more palettes from her. I have 5. I have 2 quads and 3 motherships, which is a lot. But like I've said before, I try to never buy them on at full price. I try to buy them on sale from her website so that I can get free shipping. And I mean, it's still a lot of money, but I'm just thinking about those palettes and I'm like, I've never been disappointed by any of those. And when I look at her new releases, they intrigue me. I really consider whether or not I'm going to buy them and whether or not that's a good choice. So I looked at her mothership palettes, and I have 3 of the motherships. I have 1, 5, and 7. I really thought about buying 8, but ultimately decided it wasn't going to be for me. I appreciate it from afar, but I knew that if I bought it, there were too many like hot pink fuchsia colors in that palette that I would regret it later. So then I thought, okay, out of those 3 motherships that I have, which one is my favorite? And I had to go back to what I said in an old video, which is 5 is my favorite. Mothership 5, I think it's called Bronze Seduction, is my favorite. I love this palette. It's the first Pat McGrath palette I ever bought. I chose it very carefully because of how expensive it was. I still got it on sale, but it was not cheap. And I've loved it ever since. You can see I really like this shade right here because it has the dip in it. But the mattes are excellent, the shimmers are good, the special shades are amazing, and I would highly recommend this if you felt comfortable with the price point. If you don't, just don't. If you don't feel comfortable with a price point, I just can't recommend something that when you're not comfortable with that number. But if that number doesn't scare you and you're just curious of whether or not you'll like it, I think you will. And this is my favorite. And it's a good thing, I think I said this in a previous video, I said it's a good thing it's my favorite because it's so expensive. If it was this expensive and it wasn't my favorite, that would really suck. So there you go. My opinion hasn't changed. All right. That was a long-winded explanation for why I chose that palette, but that's why. All right, the last question, which is most used palette. And I think I have to just go back to my oldest palette, which is the Mary Kay one. I mean, you saw how far I had, let me pick out the brushes and stuff so you could just look at the eyeshadow. But you can see how far I've dipped in there. Nothing else I own compares to that. When I first purchased this palette, it was one of 2 eyeshadow palettes I had. And again, I'm using Eyeshadow Palette loosely because as you can see, it only had 3 eyeshadows in it. And the other palette I had was just a Neutrogena, like a duo. So that's all I had, was those options. And so because of that, I was using it exclusively. Where now I have a much larger collection and I try to rotate it regularly so everything is getting loved. Like I'm not neglecting anything, or I try really hard to not neglect anything since I've spent good money on everything. And technically makeup has a shelf life. I mean, you might say that powder products will last a lot longer than what they suggest they will, but they're not gonna last forever. At some point, they're gonna get weird, all right? And if there's any moisture involved in where you live, they could get weird a lot faster. So I tried to rotate everything and really love what I have. And if I decide I don't love it anymore, I find it a new home. I think it was like before my wedding, I started giving away eyeshadow palettes that I wasn't using as regularly to friends and my mom. So anyway, I did want to put, and this, I don't think this qualifies either. I'm cheating again. I did want to put this as like an honorable mention because it's not an eyeshadow palette, but I use it for my eyes all the time. And that would be the Cover FX face palette. When you look at this, you can tell that this is maybe the most used thing I own, even more than that old Mary Kay thing. And I have a lot more options here. Like since I received this, I've had plenty of different highlighters and contours and all this stuff that I could use, and you could see how much I use this one in particular. And the reason why it's so overly used compared to anything else in my collection is not because this face palette is like the best of the best of the best. It's really good. Trust me, it's really good. But it's because I can use it on my eyes as well as my face. And so when I'm traveling, I'll take this and maybe one other eyeshadow palette, and sometimes I'll use this for my eyes. In fact, I use parts of this for my eyes every single day. So this right here that's called a finishing powder, do I use it for finishing powder? No, I use it for my brow bone. Every day for my brow bone. The brightener is my inner corner. Every single day is my inner corner. So those 2 dips are from eyes alone. I've never used those 2 things for anything else. Now the highlighters, do I use them for highlighters? Yes. However, do I also use them for eyeshadow? Yes. Every day I use one of them right here. I have this thing where I like to kind of like blend my shimmer into my crease color just a smidgen, just like a tiny bit. And so depending on the color of my eyes, I will either go with this more pinky shade or this more gold shade. And right in here on the inner crease, I will use that highlight. I also use it on my face, but I use it on my eyes every single day. And then for the blush, I don't really like this blush on my cheeks that much. I've used it on my cheeks, it's fine, but what I have used it for is eyeshadow. And the contour, I love this contour. I use it regularly. I think I've been using it every day for the past couple weeks, and there was a period of time where I forced myself to stop using it because I thought I was going to use it all up, and then I would have this eyeshadow, or not this eyeshadow, but this face palette, and there wouldn't be any contour in it anymore. And I'd have to get my contour somewhere else because I wasn't going to repurchase this just for the one thing. I've wanted to repurchase it many times. It is sitting in my basket online for the moment when I can feel comfortable repurchasing it, but I haven't done it yet. But I will say this, if I'm traveling, this is my crease color, this is my eyeshadow, and these are my shimmers. So face palette, yes, but do I use it for eyeshadow when I'm traveling? Yes, yes I do. So honorable mention, I know that's cheating because it's not a face palette, but it's the truth. So this was the eyeshadow tag. It's over now. I talked a whole lot. I was very long-winded. I think I had to cut myself multiple times. And I know I had to move a couple times because I'm almost 27 weeks pregnant. And so sitting like this for a long period of time, making my back hurt. I need to get up and move around. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Go ahead and leave me a comment, give me a like, whatever. Give me a thumbs down if you hated the video. If you want to do this tag yourself or you want to see who originated it, please go do that. I highly recommend all the other videos I've watched. I got a lot of inspiration from them, and I think you will too, because people have different collections than you do. And just like, I know I didn't do any swatches or anything. I thought that would, I already talk a lot. So if I was doing swatches, my hands would be gross and everything would last so much longer. But just looking at the palettes and hearing people talk about why they like them, why they picked them for something, it gives you a lot of inspiration, you know? And maybe you don't like, I don't want this to send you out to go purchase them right now, but you could look at the color story and then think, I might have some of those in my collection. And maybe I don't have that palette, but it does make you think. And then of course there's the one where it's like, maybe don't buy that one. So there you go. All right. I'll see you guys later. Bye.